talk about how these things are reflected through my family. As Nancy said, severe autism is not the Big Bang Theory, and it's not the Good Doctor. Although contemporary media depictions often focus on the quirky, what we call the quirky genius model of autism. Instead, this is a kind of a sanitized version of what severe autism looks like. I have my bloody slides for when I'm presenting to like a strictly medical audience, and people who I know won't be too disturbed from seeing it, but I kind of gave you the cleaner version. But we still see a lot of self-injurious behavior. On the left is my son Jonah, who's 22 now. He's probably like 8 years old in this picture. And on the right is a boy who looks really cute, but the helmet and the arm stays are because he's also extraordinarily self-injurious and at that point detached his retinas twice from pounding himself in the face hundreds of times an hour. So his arms had to be immobilized to keep him from doing that. Now, there's no DSM label of severe autism officially. So I know there's a lot of words on the screen. This is just a working definition that I pulled from the website of the National Council on Severe Autism, which I'm a board member. So it just emphasizes that when we talk about severe autism, we talk about lifelong dependency, round-the-clock supervision, significant intellectual disability, limited language use, and often challenging behaviors such as aggression, self-injury, property destruction, elopement, pica, things of that sort. And often those challenging behaviors present the most difficulty for families. Now, although there is no severe autism officially, there soon might be a profound autism diagnosis officially. The Lancet, just in the last month or two, the Lancet Commission, headed by Kathy Lord, the kind of esteemed autism researcher, has proposed that we break out the autism spectrum again. It was collapsed with DSM-5, which got rid of Asperger's and PDD-NOS, some of the variants of autism that had been used in the past to create one category of autism spectrum disorders. And researchers and clinicians and a lot of families also have found that to be not helpful. Now, today, the diagnosis of autism has become essentially meaningless because it could describe a Harvard Law School graduate or an adult in diapers and a helmet and who can't speak at all. So this is what's been proposed, profound autism. These are the characteristics: round-the-clock supervision, can't take care of basic everyday adaptive needs, significant intellectual disability, limited language, and a lot of comorbidities and challenging behaviors. So very similar to what we mean when we talk about severe autism. But it looks like we may have to change the name of our organization to the National Council on Profound Autism if this catches on. How common is severe autism? Well, as Nancy said, for just the prevalence for autism is 1 in 54 kids currently. Now, according to the Lancet, up to half of autistic people may qualify as profound, which is a shocking number to me. The CDC has its own set of statistics about autism. 1/3 of autistic children also have a comorbid intellectual disability. Almost half are nonverbal. And according to the research on challenging behaviors, more than half of autistic children exhibit aggressive behaviors, and more than half have the compulsion to elope. So this is not a small fringe population. This is a group millions of individuals strong, and that means millions of families affected by these issues. Now, although researchers are identifying autism in children as young as 6 months, it's impossible to predict until much later whether a child is going to have severe manifestation of autism or not. I just included these pictures of Jonah when he was baby just to show how cute he was, and we really had no idea at that time the challenges he was going to develop when he got even just a little bit older. And what do those challenges look like for severe autism families? I mean, we could spend the entire hour talking about these, but this is just a few of them. Comorbidities like epilepsy, which Jonah has, mood disorders, which Jonah has, OCD, which Jonah has, GI issues, which Jonah has, and sleeplessness, which Jonah sometimes has. There's all kinds of stress, including marital, emotional, and financial stress. Social isolation is a big one because A lot of times families can't take their severely autistic kids out of the house or into anyone else's house safely. And they also don't necessarily want to invite other people into their house to see what might look like the picture that I've included, which is not my house, although I have my own holes in the walls I could have shown. But this picture is from a blog that was submitted to the National Council on Severe Autism website, and just shows the property destruction that families are living with. There's concern about other children's risks, not only the physical risks to other children who might be the target during the kind of the rage of the autistic child, but also the risks that the siblings face when they decide whether or not to have their own families, the genetic risks that might attach. And right now it's unknown how high those risks are. Exhaustion is universal for families that we work with. The lack of necessary supports and services, especially for adults. You know, there's no entitlement for services for adults with autism or any other intellectual disability. So it kind of depends where you live, what's available. And fear for the future just paralyzes every family I know with a severely autistic kid. Who's going to take care of my kid when I'm not there to do it? So I'm going to be talking about my family and our experience, and I thought it would be, I wanted to introduce you to the cast of characters. Jonah is in front of me. My husband, Andy, is next to me. And those are our 4 other kids. They're all younger than Jonah. My daughter, Erica, is 20. She's the redhead. My daughter, Hillary, is next to Jonah. She just turned 18 this week. And then I have twins, Aaron and Gretchen, who are 14, and they're on the other side of the screen. So I'm going to read a short bit from my essay, The Next Time. And I knew we were talking about inclusion, how to include people with severe autism and their families in our public spaces. So while I read a short bit from this essay, which engages with that very question, I wanted to leave you with some images of Jonah out and about, because he loves being out in public spaces. You can see the most recent one is him with the mask at Costco. It was getting him to wear a mask was a huge kind of long struggle, and he's gotten really good at it because he really likes going out. And we do take him out to restaurants and amusement parks and all kinds of things, but it isn't always easy. So I'm going to read just a short section from this essay that engages with those issues. And it's using the framework of thinking about including individuals with significant intellectual and developmental disabilities in our moral circle, which is something that evolutionary psychologists and philosophers use to conceptualize those who we accept versus those we exclude. So we want to pull as many people as possible into the moral circle. And we talk about seeing people like Jonah as other. That means that they're not considered part of the moral circle. So the first step in including people in the moral circle is exposure. Uncoincidentally, this also happens to be one of the main reasons parents give on blogs and other platforms for why they take their autistic children out in public, despite the judgmental looks and comments elicited by their often odd, sometimes disruptive behavior. It's good for the public to get used to seeing people with differences out and about, writes Lauren Casper for the disability website The Mighty. It's good for us as a society to learn to live together in unity. One of the ways we do that is by being together in public with all kinds of people of all kinds of abilities. Ann Stout for the autism site agrees. The world needs to be exposed to children with autism. Countless myths and stereotypes abound. Allowing children with autism to interact with the public allows people to see the truth. And what is the truth? That our kids love going out just like the rest of us do. They love eating hamburgers and French fries, trying all the free samples at Costco, and pressing their cheeks against the cold freezer doors. At least Jonah does. You have to think it's that unself-conscious, contagious joy that explains why employees at all Jonah's favorite haunts inevitably ask for him whenever Andy or I show up alone. Maybe they never saw a kid before who jumped up and down and clapped while reciting fragments of Sesame Street videos, or dropped suddenly to the ground to press his hands against the smooth concrete floor, or tried to wedge himself behind cases of soda or laundry detergent. But after watching Jonah every week, I imagine those behaviors become less and less distracting until staff members were touched when they looked at him, not by what was strange, but by what wasn't. The way he affectionately loops his arm through his father's, his constant requests for more of everything, please, his obvious appreciation for places that most people find too mundane to get excited about. I know I'm being speculative, but I really can't think of another reason. Those cashiers and waitresses and security guards never ask about any of our other kids. People who routinely encounter individuals like Jonah in the community, running the same errands, enjoying the same activities, and yes, even struggling with things that come easily for others, may be more likely to engage with him. The psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who is most famous for the Stanford prison experiments, recommends a strategy called the foot in the door technique to shift attitudes. Start small. Last spring, for example, I took Jonah to an indoor water park by myself. I was a bit apprehensive how I would manage it. Unlike amusement park rides, which Jonah and I board and disembark together, and, not irrelevantly, are strapped in for the duration, water slides often require us to go sequentially. That meant I would either have to send Jonah down first and hope he would promptly exit the pool and wait for me, unlikely, or I would have to go first myself and pray that Jonah's desire to go down the slide was stronger than the temptation to take advantage of the momentary lack of supervision to sneak back down the stairs and steal a treat from the snack bar. My plan to ask the lifeguard stationed at the top of the slides for help was abandoned as soon as I saw how many slides he had to monitor. Ultimately, I just asked the person behind me in line to keep an eye on Jonah and make sure he didn't go down the slide until it was safe. Nobody ever said no. And we had a great time. Jonah listened and followed directions. And because he did, not only was he able to stay at the park as long as he wanted, but I promised him we would go back again soon. What about the strangers I enlisted? The foot in the door technique predicts that having done this small thing for us, they would be more likely to make a more involved commitment in the future. Perhaps next time they see a family like ours in a supermarket or a fast food restaurant, they might offer to let them step in front of the line. And I really believe there's no empathetic gesture that beats this one in terms of pure value. It costs so little, but often makes a tremendous difference for that family who may have been forced to leave without their lunch or their groceries because of their child's increasing agitation. Perhaps they will encourage their own children to approach kids like Jonah on the playground, invite group home residents in their neighborhood for a dip in their pool, or donate to an autism nonprofit. And don't forget about the contributions of other branches of psychology to the understanding of persuasion. Behaviorism emphasizes the importance of reinforcement. We do what we've been rewarded for doing in the past. So every happy shriek from Jonah, every expression of appreciation from me, every successful trip down the water slide facilitated by my recruits increases the likelihood of further engagement and nudges that moral circle just a bit more open. And now, just in honor of the Greater Miami Jewish Federation, I definitely wanted to end with an excerpt from my essay, "The Child Who Does Not Know How to Ask." My favorite essay in this book, and it's about the joint B'nai Mitzvah that Jonah and I celebrated in 2016 when he was 17 years old. And the essay is very long, and it really tries to wrestle with what religion can offer to someone with no abstract language. And really what I come to decide is that it's not about religion or God, but it is about community and feeling included in a religious community. So I'm just going to read the end of that essay. And for that, I have some pictures of our B'nai Mitzvah that you can look at. What if religion weren't really about God? What if all those elements that make it incomprehensible to Jonah, from the commandments to the cosmology, are merely adornments, secondary to a vital purpose that moved each and every one of us? Emile Durkheim was a French sociologist working at the beginning of the 20th century who set out to uncover the common base underlying all religions. He immediately discarded belief in God, since several major religions, including Buddhism and Jainism, are essentially atheistic. Using the simple totemic systems of Aboriginal tribes as case studies, Durkheim concluded that religion is, first and foremost, the symbolic representation of society. Its primary purpose is not, he argued, to explain natural phenomena like death or the sun, but to connect us to our community. As the scholar Mark Latis explained in his introduction to Durkheim's 1912 book, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, a society whose members were consumed by narrow self-interest and mundane activities would eventually disintegrate. Religion, in contrast, links individuals to each other and to society by animating their lives with the sacred. Powerful symbols, including secular ones, that make and remake society's collective existence. In the absence of common sacred aims, human flourishing cannot take place. I didn't discover Durkheim until after our B'nai Mitzvah, but when I did, his book finally answered the question that had nagged at me throughout the preparations and all the years I had spent agonizing over it. Why did I want this so badly? Honestly, I thought I would never know. I guess I attributed that decision to the same incoherent yet strangely persistent desires that drove me to have 5 kids, to apply to graduate school at the age of 46, and to eat myself sick many times on chocolate frosting straight out of the tub. Arguably, I should have figured this one out on my own. When I used to imagine our B'nai Mitzvah, I didn't picture Jonah reciting the Motzei over a golden braid of challah, or leading the congregation in the lovely and reverent Shema, although he did say both these prayers during the service. Instead, I have envisioned all the aides and teachers who had loved Jonah since he was in kindergarten coming back to celebrate with us. I wondered how Jonah would react to such a "this is your life" moment. Would he bounce up and down and clap, say their names, step down from the bima for a closer look? Or maybe I did know. Oh, sorry. Or step down from the bima for a closer look. I knew he remembered them all. Once in a while, even the names of people we hadn't seen in a decade popped up in Jonah's running monologue. I couldn't guess what he would think about them all suddenly showing up in one place, but I was certain there would be smiles, embraces, exclamations over how tall and handsome he was. Or maybe I did know. Traditionally, bar and bat mitzvah candidates write a Devar Torah, an analysis of their Torah portion, and read it to the congregation during the service. This is how mine ended. Preparing Jonah to become a bar mitzvah took a team of religious leaders and educators from 2 local synagogues, as well as years of private tutoring, and every single person involved in this process was not only patient, flexible, and encouraging, but they all embraced Jonah as an important and valued member of the Jewish community. And this emphasis on inclusion and support is prioritized in the Torah, even if it's not explicitly applied to the disabled. In fact, it happens to be the subject of my parsha, or Torah portion. It comes from the book of Deuteronomy, in which Moses gives the Israelites a lengthy and quite particular list of instructions on how to live a holy life. This week's parsha contains several commands concerning the care of the most vulnerable. Moses instructs the Jewish people, when you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a sheaf in the field, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. He emphasizes that we must care for one another, even at great inconvenience. If we find something that has been lost, we must return it to its rightful owner. And if we encounter a, quote, fellow's ass or ox fallen on the road, an admittedly unlikely event nowadays, we must help him raise it. The command that sums up these directions, you must not remain indifferent, is nothing less than, quote, the ethical demand of Torah, according to the Jewish scholar Harvey Fields, who adds, indifference is intolerable. Responsible caring is at the heart of Jewish ethics. The Old Testament was written about 3,500 years ago. Of course, it contains artifacts of that culture that make us uncomfortable, not just concerning the disabled, but also about women, homosexuals, and slaves. But that mandate, you must not remain indifferent, is just as powerful today as the day it was written. And whether you knew about it or not, it drives every person in this room. At some point in the last decade, Jonah needed you, and you were there for him. He screamed and hit and kicked, and it would have been so easy and so understandable for those of you who worked with him during those years to walk away, but you all stayed. And not only did you stay, you loved him anyway. We would never have gotten to this point where Jonah is stable and happy and successful in school, and I am writing and advocating for other families who almost always are not nearly as lucky as mine without your effort and commitment. So while today we are officially celebrating Jonah's and my B'nai Mitzvah, what I am celebrating most of all is the overwhelming support, the opposite of indifference, if you will, that lifted us out of some incredibly dark days and continues to nurture and inspire both me and Jonah, even if he may seem more focused on the platters of pretzels and cinnamon rolls at the party than on catching up. Words cannot describe how grateful I am to have had you in our lives, but since that's all I've got, thank you. Not only did you stay, but you loved him anyway. For Durkheim, everything in the world could be divided into two categories, the sacred and the profane. That was the most sacred moment of my entire life. So before I stop screen sharing, I just wanted to share some contact information. I'd love to answer questions now, but if you happen to come up with any questions later, I'm very easy to find. And I share a lot of information about severe autism through social media. So if that is of interest to you, please friend me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter. And please, if you love someone with severe autism or are interested in learning more about the issues faced by this population, I can't recommend a better resource than the National Council on Severe Autism, and you can find us at www.ncsautism.org.
Thank you, Amy. That was so much more than I could have hoped for. I think that your ability to share your experiences and to articulate the challenges and the beauty in the challenges and the fear in the challenges is truly what we all experience when we think about severe autism. I also am very thankful that you mentioned the Judaic perspective, because for us, you know, at Passover, at the Seder, we have 4 different types of children that we want to bring to the table, right? We don't call it charity, we call it righteousness, right? We have a responsibility to the group, to the whole entire group. And I'm not saying other religions don't, but it is very central to who we are as Jews and as Jews creating community. And here in Miami, you know, we say there's room at the table for everyone, even for the people that don't even know where the table is or what a table is. There's room at the table for everyone. So I really appreciate you sharing your story and that perspective when you were celebrating your B'nai Mitzvot with your son. What I'd also like to talk about is the challenges on the family structure and on the person giving care. Frequently, it's the mother. And from some of your writing, I have had the opportunity to look over is the martyr mother, right? So can you address what you do as an advocate for that conversation? You know, I'm a mother to an adult with autism, and we do what needs to be done, right? That's what we do. But there's an awful lot that goes into that personally for our own psyche, for our other children, for our partners. Can you spend a little time with us on what that's been like for you individually and how you advocate for that mother?
Yes, sure. So first of all, I just want to say that I don't want to give the false impression here that I'm some heroic person who spends every waking moment with my son. I've been so fortunate to have a lot of support through the years. There's no way I could have gone back to school or written 2 books or even, you know, spent time with my other kids if I had to be Jonah's just full-time round-the-clock caregiver. So I need to give major snaps. First of all, my husband, Andy, is an amazing autism dad. He's an amazing dad to all my kids, but he is just a fabulous dad with Jonah. He loves him so much. And he is the one who takes Jonah to Costco every week and BJ's and Restaurant Depot. I mean, they spend a lot of time going to these big box stores. And we've also had an entire stable of aides and teachers who have worked with Jonah in our house and out of the house. So it's been you know, say it takes a village, it probably takes like an entire nation to support a family like ours, and we've been very lucky to have that. The martyr mommy, you know, label is really puzzling to me. It's actually the last thing I wrote. I just wrote a blog post about this for Psychology Today, just to put it up a few days ago. You know, it's not a secret that the autism community is very fractured, and there are different types of sub communities, but I would say the main fault line is between the parents of severely autistic kids and autistic self-advocates who are adults who are very mildly impaired, and who many of them are, you know, graduates from Ivy League college. They might be professionals, they might be married, and they're impacted very little, or sometimes to a significant amount. There's a range, um, but compared to people like Jonah, there's just an enormous gap in functioning level. And the autistic, this particular group of autistic self-advocates who identify as a neurodiversity activist, they really embrace the autism label. They compare it to homosexuality as an identity, not a disorder. And they really are triggered by parents like myself, talking about the reality of severe autism, because the neurodiversity advocates reject that there's any such thing as severe autism, and they want to be the ones. They say they get to speak for the entire spectrum. So they say that I can't speak for Jonah. I can't possibly understand him because I myself am not autistic. And even though these neurodiversity activists have never met Jonah, just because they share this extraordinarily broad diagnostic label, they know what drives Jonah and why he does what he does and what's best for him. So we challenge that. We think that the parents, the people who love, I mean, like, I don't want a stranger, a neurotypical stranger advocating for me. You know, just I want my family to make decisions for me. I think most of us would agree with that. Mm-hmm. And so the Martyr Mommy comes out of these neurodiversity advocates who call me and other moms who write about in detail about the challenges our kids face. They describe us as Martyr Mommies. And because apparently they think we're only doing it to kind of get attention to ourselves and talk about how hard our lives are. But recently I've been reading, I feel like been this kind of national spotlight that's shining on the labor and the costs of caregiving across kind of disease categories. So I read a bunch of books recently addressing this. So Arthur Kleinman came out with a book a couple years ago, The Soul of Care, which was about caring for his wife for 10 years while she had dementia. And Dr. Kleinman's like a personal hero of mine. He's a very famous anthropologist. He wrote a blurb for my book, and it was like I was like doing the happy dance when I found that out. And then there were other books about written by a wife caring for her husband through her husband's cancer, with cancer, and another woman wrote about caring for her husband when he recovered from a traumatic brain injury after being clubbed with a baseball bat during a mugging. So, and what I thought was amazing was about these narratives that talk about how difficult it is to be a caregiver, how you have to subsume your own identity at times, and how frustrating that can be, and how difficult it is to sustain. And no one was calling out these other writers as being martyr wives or martyr husbands. And it occurred to me just how unique this discourse is in the autism community, how strange it is. And I called on disability leadership to kind of come down on this. Like, this isn't helpful. You know, you need to supporting care recipients, you need to support caregivers. It's all, everybody's working together. And to my pleasant surprise, after posting this blog, I was called out again by a prominent neurodiversity activist, and the woman who coined the term neurodiversity, a woman named Judy Singer, who I don't know, but she was on Twitter, and she kind of came to my defense against these kind of mommy martyr narratives, and pointed out how misogynistic they are, you know, and how divisive and ignorant they are. So that's where that comes from. I'm hoping that kind of calling attention to the fact that that caregivers do much needed work and need a lot of support no matter who they're caring for, and trying to encourage all of these different caregivers to come out of our silos and form some kind of a broader coalition to demand the supports and services that our families need. I think we could be a powerful voice. You know, there was a famous quote, I forgot who said it, but like it was either like Rosalind Carter or Nancy Reagan or someone, but that everybody is either a caregiver, a care recipient, or a future caregiver, a future care recipient. You know, this affects everybody, and yet we're not working together the way we should to make the changes in our long-term care service and support system.
Well, I think COVID has really shined a spotlight not only on our families with somebody with a disability, where the family unit now became the daily caregiver, the educator, the entertainment experience, meal sourcing and housekeeping within a confined space. And that really became very evident. The stress on our families here in Miami was very, very evident. And I think also in the wider circle, outside of the disability circle, exactly people who were caring for family members with Alzheimer's or dementia, it was also that opportunity to say, look what's happening to the caregiver. I think it's easy to pick on the caregiver, because to turn the conversation to what are the services missing on a federal level that should be employed, so that when you have somebody who's in need of care, you can reach out to a structure and you can find qualified caregivers. You can find resources for you as a family for stress and anxiety reduction and for self-care. That's a really tough conversation to have. It's so much easier to say, oh, this is, some sort of Munchausen by proxy experience for these mothers who want to be seen as, the workhorse, the martyr, and the savior of their family all at the same time. It would be so much harder to have the other conversation about what do we do on a federal level to make sure that all of us are guaranteed a standard of care. I always say to people, disability is the only minority that's open to everyone.
Yeah.
Because you can acquire a disability in life, right? You just walk out your door. Don't even walk out your door. Everyone knows the story in my house. You don't have to leave your own house for that to happen, right? So it's an equal opportunity experience for everyone. So I think shifting the conversation to where do we go structurally to provide care for the individual who needs care and support for the family is a much more challenging conversation, but hopefully one that we can go forward with. And I appreciate your sharing that experience. I know many people here on the screen are parents and have had the challenge of providing care, especially in COVID, where you are now the educator as well. And it's been enormously stressful on families. I want to just step back for a minute too and talk about how there's sort of like a fashion in autism, or fashion in the care for autism, where it's not, decisions and labels aren't really made based on data. The whole idea of high-low functioning, things of that nature, but more based on how we feel, how we want to be perceived as a community. The idea of everyone should be included in every classroom, really not understanding the differentiation. And can you just give us an idea? And then I'm going to ask Dr. Michael Alessandri to jump in the conversation too, about how do we, as a community and as a country, make that shift away from the cultural ideas of caring for the individual with a disability to the data-based experience? How do we make decisions based on data? And how do we make sure that there's choice for every level of impact?
Sure. So neurodiversity advocates really hate functioning labels. So they say, we can't talk about high functioning and low functioning, it's offensive to everybody. And besides, they argue functioning is fluid. So one of them says, I might lose my words at times. And but honestly, anyone who can make an argument like that is never, ever low functioning. And as much as I don't love those phrases, I can't think of better alternatives, and I think we need to make that distinction. So the neurodiversity advocates want to use phrases like high support needs versus low support needs, but the problem is that still elides people like Jonah and the conversation, because you can have a normal or even superior intellect and still have high support needs, right? I'm thinking of Stephen Hawking or Christopher Reeve. It's
Yeah.
calling someone high support needs doesn't get at that fundamental dependence and the significant impairments that an intellectual disability can have for somebody, especially in combination with autism and all the um, just the auditory issues and the language impairments and everything else working together. So I think it's really important that we have functioning labels, whatever they are. I use high and low functioning now, but I'm open to, other ones as long as they're accurate. And because there is such a range in functioning that demands an equally broad range of supports and services to reflect those different needs and preferences across the entire spectrum. And I think part of the reason why neurodiversity advocates reject those functioning labels is because they also reject this idea that we need a choice of options. They argue that everybody with a disability should be served, basically get their own apartment in the community and a competitive minimum wage job. And moms people like myself, I'm jumping up and down saying, hey, my son, he actually can never have a competitive minimum wage job. And it's like cricket. They don't even want to hear that Jonah is too impaired for that one solution that's being offered. So I spend most of my advocacy work just fighting for a range of residential, vocational, educational options. Just more is better. Speaking as a medical, yes, as a historian of medicine, when the disability rights movement started in the 1960s and mostly 70s, it was fighting for more different types of services. We don't just want to serve people in institutions. Let's build these community settings. And now we're doing the opposite. We're saying the disability rights movement is driving a movement to narrow down the range of options to just one model. And clearly that's not going to work for everybody. I just can't believe some of the debates that I find myself in. I feel common sense clearly supports the need for a range of options. And I feel it's surreal that I have to defend that idea. And it's even more surreal that we're losing. So you mentioned, educational settings. There are definitely people who feel that all kids can thrive in inclusive classrooms. And maybe that works for the vast majority of kids, especially young ones. And I think a lot of the parents making that kind of call have very young children. But when you get to high school, there is no high school class where Jonah, with his tested IQ of 40 and his lack of abstract concepts, could participate in any meaningful way. He can't read, he can't follow the story in Llama Llama Red Pajamas, and never mind reading anything in the high school English class. And plus, he would be extraordinarily disruptive because he wouldn't be able to sit for 40 minutes. It would be really frustrating for him. He would bang on the desk. He would try to get up. And, he was in an autism specific school, basically since he was kicked out of his included kindergarten after he broke a teacher's nose. That's when the school district said, we're going to do the special autism school for him. And he loved it. I mean, he thrived in that environment, and he now as an adult is in the adult program at the school where he was from age 14 to 21. So it's just an amazing community-based secondary school for kids with significant autism. And he just
And that works for him.
so much better. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to widen the conversation a little here. We're really fortunate. We have a number of people within the community who are really the backbone of support, family support, and the provision of services. So I'd like to just address this concept of differentiation and choice, and the idea that we need a broad selection of services from which then the families can choose what would be appropriate for their family member. And that may change over time, or it may not change over time. But the important thing is that we have a broad range of services available. So I have on the screen here Dr. Michael Alessandri, the director of CARD. I also have Linda Sachs, who works with JAFCO and the Children's Ability Center. She runs support groups. Dr. Alessandri's organization runs many support groups, English, Spanish, grandparents, because we do recognize that it's the life experience. CARD now has a support group for people on the spectrum who also have medical conditions. And we also have, I want to get to housing as well, but we're going to hang on Maria Eileen Whitehurst and Tom Whitehurst for a moment, and Debbie Lawrence. And I also want to say that we also have on the call Nancy Torres, who works with the Family Navigator program. So Michael, I'm going to pass it to you, and I'm going to ask each one of you to address this question. When you're working with families, the need for differentiation of services, how do you channel the family to understand what they should be looking for and where they should find it?
Nancy, I'm happy to do that. I've just been sitting here, just really enjoying, first of all, listening to Amy. I've read her book and her blogs, and I think the one thing that always screams out at me every time I put down something that I've read of hers is it's just so sensible. It's just sensible. Like, this is not controversial. This is not challenging to understand, and I don't understand where the divide comes. I have some thoughts about where it comes from, but I also want to say that I met my first child with autism when I was 17, 40 years ago this summer, 1981, and nothing has infuriated me more in 40 years than this assault on parents. I think it's the most disgusting, reprehensible thing that I've ever seen. It just takes us back to where we began with autism, and it's so frustrating to people like me who've been in the field. I watched Lovaas and Greenspan debate, and that was pleasant compared to what we're dealing with now. I think it's really unfortunate. I think we have to, and I'm as guilty as anyone. Like, people like me have to stop, being so damn politically correct and start telling truth. We have to speak up, and we have to fight back and speak back to the community that's saying, some of the things that are absolutely, just disgusting, frankly, from my point of view. I mean, we work with at CARD the whole spectrum, from kids who will need, constant care for the rest of their lives to the individuals who go on to graduate law school. And finding, your voice as a leader in that group is challenging, because you do have to speak to all of them. But there are some things that are just indefensible. And I think this assault on moms in particular, and on parents in general, has to be confronted head on. And I think the other thing that I will say is that nomenclature is important. It's critical. When we shifted to a single diagnostic category for autism in 2013, we made a huge mistake as a field. I think these are different, not only different ranges of functioning, I think they're different conditions. You can't tell me that Amy's son has the same disorder as your son, Nancy, or on any of the other folks on the call. We know there are multiple biological and genetic pathways to all of these disorders. These are different conditions, and nomenclature matters, whether it's profound autism or severe autism or Asperger's, if we bring it back. I think until we get back to defining these groups more carefully, we're going to have these battles about who's who and who deserves what, and what the system should look like. So I don't want to be preachy, but it just frustrates me that someone who's so sensible could be attacked ever by individuals who question her passion and commitment to her child, in the context of trying to be a martyr. No mother that I know with a severely affected child with autism has chosen this path, right? Like, let's be honest about that. And I think you have to really just, as a community, we have to fight back. And the other thing I will say is choice is everything. Like, everything that we've ever learned in our world as professionals is it should be about choice. We're talking about self-advocacy. We're talking about self-determination. We're talking about people making a choice for how they want to live their lives. But the parents have a right to have a choice too, for the life their children want to have, if their children can't determine that or say that for themselves. So I think choice is everything. One of the things I said earlier before people joined us is that, we get a lot of pushback on a lot of things because from people in the disability rights community and the other advocacy groups who want to limit choices, as you've said. And as I've said many times, when eliminating a choice is just as bad as forcing a choice on someone. And we have to really begin to remember that. We have a beautiful affordable housing community that's being built in Miami, and it's all about people choosing to live there. No one's forcing anyone to live there. No one's mandating that this is the, some kind of institutional life that they should pursue. It's a choice. And if we don't recognize that there is a range, I mean, we all know on this call that there's a range of functioning in these individuals, and to pretend that there's not is just ludicrous, right? There is high functioning, there is low functioning, there are people who are highly verbal, and there are people who are nonverbal at all. And to diminish that by just erasing those discriminators, I think is also problematic for the field. And I just want to say that everything that I believe in begins and ends with choice. And I think because of that, you have to have an array of options. You can have, housing communities that are fully inclusive and that are fully community-based, but then, I mean, for sure, we need highly supported residential options as well for those who need significant needs. And I have to say, I run a very big organization that serves, essentially everyone who wants to be served in South Florida. And I don't think we're doing a great job serving the severe cases of autism. I'm fully aware of that. I think we have challenges in our own execution of our mission and our vision. And I think the first step in remedying that is to just be honest about it. Like, acknowledge that you're not being an optimal service provider, and none of us is. I mean, Linda does it the best. Thankfully she's here tonight. The respite care that they offer so many families who are desperate for a break is life changing, and I applaud her. There's no respite care in Dade County. It's mind boggling, frankly, that we don't have a way to support families in these difficult times. And to pretend that these families who are dealing with severe autism are not suffering from PTSD is another delusional, road that we've gone down. And I think we have to, those of us who are service providers and want to take care of people emotionally, need to start there. We need to start with fundamental awareness of the PTSD that these folks are suffering, and try to support them as best we can, not just with our services and our love and our, my open arms are always around people, but we have to change the way we deliver services. We have to change government policies, and we have to change, communities, and we have to get people to really pay attention to those people who are invisible for some reason. And they're invisible because there is not a lot of opportunity for them to access services. And when they don't get access to the services they need, they isolate even more, which is why we see them even less. So I know that was a bit preachy, but I mean, listening to Amy is just so refreshing, and it's so controversial, despite the fact that I know she stimulated her own controversies here and there, but it's not controversial. It's like, if you just acknowledge the fact that the range of the human condition, none of this is controversial. Let's just be sensible. And I think we can't be silent anymore. I think all of us who care about everyone on the spectrum or everyone in the disability community has to step up and confront some of these erroneous ways of thinking, I think. So
thank you, Michael. And I think, when I hear your voice and I hear what you're bringing to the conversation and what Amy has, is that the lowest common denominator on anybody who identifies on the spectrum is that there is no one way to be on the spectrum, and that choice should be the lowest common denominator, whether it's the person who wants to have the opportunity.
Come back, Nancy.
Oh, hey, nuts, you can hear me?
There she goes.
Okay.
You're back now. Yeah,
so what I hear from you, sorry, you never know. So what I hear from you is that choice is really the lowest common denominator within the autism spectrum. And that when we look at it like a spectrum, that really brings it to light. I'd like to pass it over to Linda Sachs and to address, and then have Linda Sachs and Nancy Torres talk about what we actually have, what happens when families come to you and say, listen, I have a newly diagnosed child, or I have an adult, and I am in need of care, not only for the individual, but for the family unit and the caregiver. Right. So please.
Yeah, thank you so much for an opportunity to be invited into this really powerful conversation. It's very inspiring. I've been a licensed clinical social worker for 40 plus years, and just sitting with all of you is so inspiring to me. I've been with JAFCO, located in Sunrise, for the past 12 years, and helped them as they began to visualize what the community needed. And we went, and I remember Michael was one of the first persons I spoke to, and I was super intimidated. And I guess I've grown up a bunch since then, and he was always so kind.
I'm just less intimidating now. That's what
maybe that's what it is. You are very nice.
No, you're amazing.
We wanted to develop a place, a one-stop shop that would really be inclusive of individuals at all varying levels of functioning, and to create a place that parents would feel safe and that sense of belonging that we heard you talk so much about, Amy. We wanted, like, nobody left behind, like all of the wonderful things that typically developing children get to do. We wanted all of the children to experience at a level they could. So, you know, my mind's going in a lot of directions, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but what we want to do and what we do at JAFCO is to embrace the whole family from the moment of diagnosis all the way through the journey. That we, if they don't have a diagnosis, we help to point them in the direction of where to get the diagnosis. But we do a very thorough assessment to really identify what individuals need and help to both provide them with all of the services we provide, the enrichment programs, the parent education and training, and I'll talk in a minute about the support groups, but also to partner with everybody in the community to connect them with what's out in the community that they need, what therapies they might need, et cetera. We just wanted to be that place that didn't say, I'm sorry, come get your child, it's too difficult. They're hitting other children, they're doing this, that, and the other thing. We wanted to be that zero reject place where, because we have behavioral support, because our staff is well educated and trained, that all children are included, and we are able to serve children who are the severe autism because of the small staff to child ratio. And I think that's one of the things that has made us different, is because we can do a lot of one-on-one, we can serve all children, right? But what I've really been most involved with in my work is really trying to support the parents, to help them through the whole process of acceptance, of course, getting everything they need, their services. But a lot of what I really take pride in is helping parents to have a life. Because I think that there's an enmeshment or a codependency for good reason, because there's such protectiveness to make sure that their children are cared for and get everything they want, but parents lose themselves. So often in our groups, we talk about how to cope, how to love themselves, how to identify what they need, and to go from struggling to thriving. So there's a lot of love, a lot of support in those groups where, you know, our parents feel less alone, and they feel safe to talk about all their feelings, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And started a support group a couple of years ago to help parents have the courage to talk about, with their children with severe autism, placement, because placing children residentially is so painful and challenging to know what to do and to feel okay about that decision. So we started that group, and we've helped a lot of parents have the courage to do what they felt was best for their whole family in terms of residential placement. So we serve the whole spectrum, children birth through 22 at all levels of functioning. And I'm not sure what else to say. I mean, what else can I say? Nancy, you're on silent.
No, thank you.
Thank you for what you do, Linda. I set it up, put it in the chat, the respite care, particularly for our families who have very severe presentations of autism. It is absolutely life-saving for them. I mean, these are families who never get a break. And actually, I think COVID, you know, taught us a lot of lessons, but it also, you know, it illuminated some things, I think, for many of us very clearly, which is that when you take away like the one thing that the families may have, which is school, there's really no other supports for so many of our families. They are literally alone, and they're forced to survive with so little.
Right.
So it was very illuminating for me. And I think I think what you do is great. And I think that as a complement to all the other things that are happening in this community, it's a wonderful addition. But it's but it's never enough. We have to do better as a community to put more and more layers around these families to be supportive.
And the safety issues too, Michael. I mean, we all know about what happened to Alejandro Ripley. Yes. And when we heard that, we all jumped at, we must open our doors and do everything we can to be safe. But we had for quite a while e-learning going on in our facility, extra respite going on, and made sure that we were really sending the message out that we're here. If you're in crisis, please contact us. We want to provide respite. And so just for those of you that may not know, we have an actual house on our property. So we can do a few hours of respite, a whole day, and extended respite to people that live anywhere. There's no limitation to where.
Right. And I want to point out that you don't, so just like in my organization and your organization, you don't have to be Jewish to access these services.
Yes, it's always been our privilege to serve families of all ethnicities and backgrounds. And because we're a private nonprofit, finances is not an obstacle. That families come to us and we work with each family, and we have lots of grants and lots of funding. So we're able to help.
But never enough, Linda. You never know who's listening. Never enough.
Right, never enough. Right? That's what keeps us going. We need more and more donations.
I just want to say, though, and Nancy, if I may, this Alejandro Ripley was a young boy whose mother drowned him last spring as COVID was kind of hitting here in Miami. So just to put a story to that. I also noticed, I see, I only know her by name, but I'm a big fan. Jill Escher's here, Amy's colleague, and she's done also remarkable work in this area. And I think Amy and Jill and their crew at NICSA have been talking about moving from awareness to acceptance to action. And I think that's what we're talking about here tonight, right? Let's move to action. Let's stop talking about all this acceptance and awareness nonsense, and let's actually do something that actually means something to families. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, right. No, listen, I think this is exactly, it's the right audience to share these thoughts with. I mean, within our own framework, in the Jewish framework, we have it's a terribly long name, but it will be shortened in the next year. It's known as Jewish Disabilities Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. I think that language is very important. I think it shapes our thoughts. And by next year, I think it will just be called Jewish Disabilities Awareness Month. I also want to give an opportunity. I know that, Linda, you run some of your support groups with Zippy Rosen, who's also on the line here. And I'm glad that we all pointed out that our services are available to everyone. Does not matter of your affiliation. Also that in my organization, we also do have grants for people that have been negatively impacted by COVID, and you do not have to be Jewish to access any of those resources. So please, never think that that's an impediment to reaching care for your individual. We also have Nancy Torres here, who is with the Family Navigator program. So I want to just give an opportunity for Nancy to share with our families here about what her program does. And also then I would just like to segue back to Casa Familia, because we are very lucky in that we have a number of Casa Familia board members on the screen as well. So Nancy, if you could give the group an idea of what you do and the services that you provide.
Thank you, Nancy. So I am Nancy T. I wasn't expecting to talk tonight. I am not presentable, but thank you for the opportunity. I want to say that my family is a perfect example of the openness from the Jewish community, because as you can guess, we are an immigrant family coming from Venezuela. My son was born here, and when he was about to turn 5, we found this amazing school called the Gordon School of Beth David Congregation, the Tikva Center. And even though we are not Jewish, we were received with open arms, and our son spent there like 5 years, and we had an amazing experience, and we saw so much progress thanks to the program, to the Tikva program and the inclusion program. So it's we had a good example of that. So I'm the director of the Family Navigator program at the University of Miami, the Mellman Center for Child Development. And because of my personal experience and being in the right time, in the right place, I was invited to run this program by Dr. Brosco. That was in 2016. And since then, this program is available for any family of a child with a disability, a risk of having a disability, or any kind of genetic disorder, mental health, any kind of situation that requires guidance and connection with the different resources available. So that's what we do. We are like a bridge between the family and the different resources available within the University of Miami, and of course in the community where the family lives. And we provide one-on-one support to each family. And we follow up our families. Before COVID, it was like for 3 months. During COVID, we are staying with our families like for 5 months, like an average, to make sure they are connected with the different resources that are available in the community, with JACO, with a UN CAR, with a Casa Familia, whatever they need. That's the connection that we will work on. So that's what we do. And I have to, I wanted to comment that really a small percentage of our families that they basically come from referral by the UN clinics and programs are families of children with profound autism, which makes me wonder where these families are, right? It's the same happening with low-income families. The families that most need the services are the ones that are not receiving them. So we are not reaching enough for them.
It's true.
Michael and I talk about that frequently, about how the numbers are growing for his constituency at UM-CARD. You're up to probably more than 12,000, but that's not statistically accurate for Dade County, right?
Yeah, we're well under what it should be based on the prevalence of Dade County. And as Nancy said, the well-resourced people often find more of the resources, and the families who need the most resources either don't find them, can't get to them, or it's just too difficult to navigate. If you have a severely behaviorally disordered child with intellectual disabilities and autism, I mean, the idea of going to the medical campus of the University of Miami to sit in a waiting room for an appointment with the doctor is, overwhelming. Thankfully, we have Nancy who can help navigate that, but think about how complicated that is for so many of our families. And Marie Eileen, Karen, and others who are on the call tonight have dealt with this for 30 plus years. They can speak, or 20 something, they can speak to that.
I also just want to bring attention to something that University of Miami also does. Nancy Torres and I teach in a graduate fellowship program that the University of Miami's Mailman Center has, leadership development in neurological disorders, working with pediatric residents, OT, PT, speech professionals, and teaching them how to create partnerships with the families. And I always say that the ideal family that I'm trying to impact is the single mother who does not have English as a first language, who has an hourly job, who uses public transportation, has maybe 3 or 4 children, and cannot take off work and spend the day trying to find out what's available for her child. And that's really, the family that we think we need to find and impact most. I do want to bring in Casa Familia. We are very, very fortunate to have in our community a number of family advocates who not have only participated in the structure that UM-CARD has created through their board. I think there must be at least 10 former board members here on this experience night. But
they never go away. They always.
You know what? We don't go away. We move into the community and we push the community forward, right? That's what we do. So I want to bring into the conversation, especially the parents that we have here that are board members for Casa Familia. I think each one has had a unique experience as a parent to an individual on the spectrum who has severe autism, who's had these challenging behaviors that Amy has shared with us. And I'm going to start with Marie Eileen Whitehurst. I know Tom is here as well, and Deborah Lawrence and Karen Jowitz is here as well. I think that we are very fortunate. And if Marie Eileen, if you could just give us an opportunity to learn about your journey with your son briefly, and how you envision, how you knew the community needed to have something and how you moved forward with it. And you can unmute.
Sorry. Thank you, Nancy. Well, first of all, this has been an amazing, such a wonderful evening so far. Amy, a few of us of the Casa Familia group had an opportunity to listen in to the webinar that the National Council for Severe Autism had a couple of weeks ago. So we had an opportunity to hear you speak.
right after that, my husband, Tom, who's on the call, went out and got your book. We walked, and he said it was a great book. So I'm going to hopefully read it soon. So thank you for the work you're doing. It's, as a parent, as a mother of a 28-year-old son with, I call him with, who's significantly impacted by his autism, is the way I describe him. But he would fall under the category of severe autism. He is nonverbal. He has had the wonderful opportunity to work, well, not during COVID, but for the last few years, Michael Alessandri is his boss. And he works 1 day a week at the UM Card Center for 2 hours doing the shredding of their confidential documents. And he loves his job. He feels, I think, a real sense of responsibility. He is diligent about being there, and he loves it. But he's really, his autism is it really affects all parts of his life. So Karen Jawitz is on the call, and I have known each other for a very long time. We met 26 years ago, and I'll let Karen say a few words, but we came together about 6 years ago because Tom and I had started to think about the future for Thomas and others like Thomas, where they were going to live. Same questions everybody asks: who will take care of our children when we are no longer here to do that? And so we recognize the need in our community. Our community is a great community, thanks to people like Michael, Nancy, but nobody really was addressing housing in our community. And this was an area that we realized that was going to have to be driven by parents and their commitment and their passion. So Karen and I started talking about this, and we started Casa Familia, a nonprofit, and our mission is to sponsor the development of affordable housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities within an enriched community setting, because that was what we felt was the key to what we thought was the best option for our children, and that we wanted them to be part of a community where there would be lots of supports available, lots of socialization. And so it's been a journey of 6 years, but we are happy to say that we expect groundbreaking to be this summer. And it will be a multi-phase community. First phase will be more for independent individuals, so not the ones that we're really addressing tonight, but that would be 60 units. And then phase 2 will address those individuals that do require more supports and services. Phase 3, we haven't even begun to do. But so we're very excited. Michael Alessandri's on our board. He's been part of us, as always there every step of the way. He's our savior. So anyway, Karen, I don't know if you'd like to add a few words.
Sure, of course. First, again, thank you so much. This has been so informative, inspiring. Amy, I met you at Misericordia when you spoke. How many years ago was that? Like 5, right?
Long time ago, yeah.
You there. So I'm a mom of 2 sons on the spectrum. I have I know politically we're not sure how we use these terms, but I have a son who has less needs or higher functioning. His name is Eric. He works, he has a job. He takes public transportation. He does drive a car. He's friends with Hyro. I see you're here, Hyro. I think they're going to the movies tomorrow or Sunday. And then I have a son who's his name is Gregory, and he is severe. He does live in a group home. He's nonverbal, and he does have behaviors. He also has epilepsy, which developed when he was 16. So I have the experience on kind of both ends of the spectrum. And again, like Marianne said, we knew that even with both of them, they were both going to need supports for the rest of their life. Different types of supports, but supports. And again, we're not going to be here forever, although we'd like to be. And, we knew that we needed to create something for our adults. So again, Marianne gave me a phone call. This was years ago. And like I said, Marianne said we've known each other for many years. And created a mission, a vision, got a board. You know, we started as families. We did expand to a community board, and I think Debbie can say a few words about that in a few minutes, because I want you to hear from Debbie as well. Debbie is our housing director. She was a founding board member. And we've chipped away at this huge iceberg to get to where we are. It's not easy, and I can see why people don't do this. It's a huge challenge. And the programming and the supports are, and how is this going to look? It's not easy. It's a challenge. But we've worked really hard, and Debbie can tell you about the details about how Casa Familia and the Village of Casa Familia will function. But again, thank you all very much for inviting us. Nancy, it's great to see you. We need to get together, I know.
Soon enough.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Karen. And before we pass the mic over proverbially to Deborah Lawrence, I ask that if you have a question, please post it in the chat. And then I will read out a few questions. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. It is about 9 minutes before we end the program, around 9 o'clock-ish. And I do want to have the opportunity to hear from Deborah Lawrence, to pose a few questions to Amy Lutz, and then also to wrap up with some of the things that we have going on for Federation. We have a film that I think is very on point for this group. So Deborah, would you please?
Thank you so much. I won't take much of your time because I know time is short. Amy, so incredibly nice to meet you. You are incredibly inspirational, and I can relate to every word you say. While I'm super proud to be the senior housing director for Casa Familia and had a very similar journey to Karen and Marie Eileen, the reality is my most important job is as mother to my 2 boys. My younger son, 19, who has severe autism, is nonverbal and has a lot of the same characteristics you describe in your own child. And so I can relate to a lot of those sort of milestone events that occurred in your life. And so I thank you for speaking up on behalf of those with severe autism, because many are just too busy going through, getting sort of through that next day to really have the energy to speak up. And we all sort of take our different path. Marie Eileen, Karen, and I, with the help of Michael Alessandri as our guide from the beginning, have chosen to take the path of addressing the housing piece. You know, for me, I've got a background of 25 years in housing, so it was sort of a natural move in that direction, sort of my way cathartically of dealing with what can I control, because there were so many things I couldn't control. Like you, I went back to grad school and studied behavior analysis, but to be frank, that wasn't my avenue forward. My avenue forward was this. And like Michael says, choice, choice, choice. This is about individuals having choices. Our first phase is intended to serve individuals with limited needs, limited additional assistance needed. But our future phase is intended for those with more significant needs. We do want to serve those with a broad spectrum of needs, and that means that that choice has to come from the families, from the parents who have to be that voice for the voiceless. And so we definitely want to carry sort of that theory, you know, that mantra you state, so that we do listen to those voices of those families to be the voice for our children who don't have a voice. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences as a parent, and how this community has really stepped up and is creating supported housing, creating choices, and recognizing the differentiation between the needs of one individual. Just as Karen would not choose the same path for both of her sons, we have to have opportunity and choices for all of the individuals in our community. So I do not have any questions in the chat, but I think that we've been really lucky to all come together tonight. The Greater Miami Jewish Federation continues its programming for Autism Awareness Month with a film. The Miami Jewish Film Festival has been named one of the top 50 film festivals in the country. Notice I didn't say Jewish film festivals. It's one of the top 50 film festivals in the country. We are very, very fortunate to have the team that we do, putting together an enormous program. And this year, almost everything is screened virtually. And the film that we have is really on point for this group. It's called Here We Are. And it is a movie set in Israel about a family coming to the point of discussion and change within how they care for their adult with autism who does need help for his daily experiences, and what the family goes through they were not all on the same page. Like we all know, we're not all on the same page when we're talking about choices for our own family member. It's a great film. If you look back to the original flyer, or if you email me, I can send you the link. We're streaming this film for free, as all of our films for the Miami Jewish Film Festival are free. And this film is available April 22nd, today, through the 29th in the state of Florida for free. And again, it's a wonderful film. I want to thank everyone for coming together to talk about severe autism. Amy, you've really enriched our own understanding, not only of what it is like to parent a person with severe autism, but also the spiritual end, where we are when we recognize that we are all made in the image of God, not just the ones that are pleasing, right? And that we have a responsibility to our entire community to offer opportunities for our entire community. And I really appreciate all that you've accomplished, and I look forward to reading more of your work. And Michael, as always, love to partner with you. I would say I'll always dance with Michael. Maybe one day we'll get back to really dancing, but the University of Miami is an enormous partner to the entire community of Miami-Dade County, but especially so the Department of Psychology and the Mailman Center. It is a very strong town and gown relationship, and we enrich each other. And I'm very thankful for that relationship. And I want to also thank Nancy Torres, Linda Sachs, the whole team from Casa Familia, and I have several dear friends on the call as well who are parents and providers. So we are a very rich tapestry of the community, and imagine what we will achieve if this is where we are right now, right? So thank you very much. Amy, I'll leave you closing goodbye for the evening.
I just want to thank you for having me, and thank you, Nancy, for organizing. And Michael, when you kind of went on your rant, I really felt seen, and I didn't even realize Jill was on the call because she was not on my screen that I can see, but then I saw her pipe up, and we need the support of the professionals and the doctors like you to kind of to help us in this fight. You say that it's not controversial, but it is controversial. It shouldn't be controversial, but it's enormously controversial. And maybe with the help, NCSA has really, we've been very conscientious about aligning ourselves with doctors and practitioners, clinicians, researchers, because we really feel that the science and the medicine is kind of on our side in these types of debates. And we just hope to work together with you more in the future.
That's great. Thank you. And you'll notice in the chat, I have posted the Miami Jewish Abilities website. Once again, one-stop shop that comes along with me, and a calendar jam-packed with virtual events. Also within the chat, Nancy Torres has posted the link to her Family Navigator program. I think that everyone is familiar with UMCard. It's umcard.org. Also a very jam-packed calendar. And JAFCO, thank you very much, Linda. You put it out there. JAFCO hosts, I know of at least 3 weekly support groups that are virtual, and you may be going back to in-person. So there's a lot in the community. If you are struggling, please reach out. If you're struggling emotionally, financially, physically, please reach out to us. And then I see a question now. And Broward, yes, Broward does also have Joshua's Path, and it also has the Broward Jewish Abilities Alliance, but we all work in concert. So if you only have my email, you email me and I will set you on the path to find the resources that you need. Okay, so thank you once again for coming together. I appreciate everybody using their personal time, their evening, to really share and inform and enrich the community. So I wish you well, and watch the movie. It's really good.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Amy. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Good night,
Nance.
everyone.
Oh, my pleasure always.